Hi everybody. I wanted to send out this pre-recorded talk so that we can have more time on our final day for discussion and activities. So on day 1 and 2, we spent a fair bit of time talking about and reflecting on the power of language and how important it is for cultivating a growth mindset and creating an inclusive classroom environment. So near the end of day 2, the topic of asset versus deficit-based language came up, and this short video will cover that topic in more detail. Certainly not comprehensive. Language, and especially deficit and asset and inclusive language, is a very big topic. And on that, I will just say that there is a lot of evolution in this area taking place. And because of that, I'm going to really focus more on general principles than on specific examples, although there are a couple. So there is a link in the revised agenda that you got with the link to this video, and it includes a style guide with more guidance on how to speak about specific topics in a more asset-based way. And there is also a video embedded in this talk by Kelly Kitagawa, and she is a YouTuber who has a great channel called Personal Politics. So the link to that is also in the agenda. So if you get to that point and you need to take a break, know that it's always there. Also, please don't share this video talk out, because this is really kind of embedded in our 3-day training and it's only a very small part. And so I don't want it to be taken out of context. And so with that, I will go ahead and share my screen. All right, so this is a precursor to day 3 of the growth mindset and equity-minded mathematics teaching for Cal Poly Pomona. And we are talking about asset versus deficit-based approaches. And this is just another layer to how our language really matters for creating more equitable and inclusive learning environments. And so this document is from Puget Sound Educational Services, and they developed this guide really with a lot of collaboration. So I thought I would draw from it, and it's also linked to on the agenda. And so a deficit-based language is really focusing on what students lack, what the deficits are, and it conveys like what's missing and needs to be fixed. So it's really a needs and problems focused, and it can lead educators to make assumptions about what a student may already know or can do. And it also can imply that the student must change to fit the system, rather than looking at how the system might be kind of replicating ways that the student is not able to succeed. And so an asset-based approach is really focusing more on the strengths that a student brings to the learning community, viewing diversity in thought and culture and other traits as positive assets, that can enhance the learning experience for all students. And it's really opportunity focused. So you can see the link there to growth mindset, that thinking about challenges as opportunities to grow and improve. And it's really looking at finding ways to think about how the system can meet the student's needs and meet the student where they are at, and recognizing this system also probably needs to adjust and be improved. And so when we think about asset-based versus deficit-based approaches, some examples of this can include, as you've heard me make the mistake, instead of saying ladies and gentlemen or guys, really try to think about ways to say it in a more inclusive way, like folks, everyone, y'all. Rather than saying like grandfathered in, you could say legacy. Or rather than minority, we are much more likely to say nowadays minoritized or underrepresented. Disabled person is preferable to say person with a disability. And so when we think about asset-based approaches, how I like to think about it is that it is about treating people and groups with dignity and respect by affirming their competence, their value, their self-efficacy, and their agency. And these are really autonomy supporting. And so you can see the tie here to what we talked about on day 1, when we think about how we all have core psychological needs to feel competent, to feel a sense of our sense of belonging and that we are seen as a person of value and our autonomy. And it is really about avoiding stigmatizing labels that can reinforce negative stereotypes. So prioritizing empathy and trust. And when I say empathy and trust, I'm really meaning both individually within interpersonal relationships, but also how we're engaging with different communities of learners and communities in general. So also authority figures are shifting away from thinking of themselves as the superior one who has the advanced knowledge and needs to fix the problem, towards more of a collaborative, co-creating way of approaching achieving goals and overcoming challenges. And so at the heart of this, really what is needed for an asset-based approach are the skills of active listening and developing effective questions. And I came across something that I thought I would just throw in and share with you, where we can see that this shift is really starting to permeate a lot of different domains. And this came from a research paper that was highlighting some new evidence-based ways of working with people who are at risk of suicide. And this particular quote is about a program called CAMS. And I want to just highlight the language shift here. They are saying that this approach is really representing a shift from an adversarial model in which the doctor knows best and must control the patient, to a deeply collaborative approach in which the patient becomes co-author of their own treatment plan. And even in how they are labeling this particular issue, they're saying patients at risk of suicide rather than suicidal patients. And so I think that there's a lot of positive shift that is happening. One thing I will say, though, is that as we think about developing inclusive language and asset-based language, we also need to bring in this piece of reflecting on our own consciousness and our own identities. So developing a growth mindset, an asset-based mindset really means thinking about and reflecting on what are some implicit assumptions that can get tangled up in our theory of the problem, which is how are we thinking about a problem that might expose what kinds of assumptions we have about why this person or this group is experiencing XYZ. Learning to think about social and cultural systems that are contributing to creating and reinforcing those observed equity gaps, and staying curious and seeing and addressing how we might have knowledge gaps, both about ourselves or about the particular condition that we're reflecting on. And so we might need to think about how are our assumptions kind of exposing a lack of knowledge, a fixed mindset, or maybe a supremacy belief. And we're going to talk a lot more about what supremacy beliefs and what supremacy, sort of internalized supremacy beliefs mean on day 3. But for now, I want to play the video that I mentioned, and here we go.
Hey, I'm Kelly, and this is Personal Politics, where I get up close and personal with ideas that spark change. You know what needs to change? The PC police. Okay, so language. Yes, let's talk about words, baby. Let's talk about all the good words and the bad words that may be words. I'm so sorry. Roll the intro, please. Language is really such a beautiful thing, and from the wisdom of cognitive scientist Lera Boroditsky, language shapes us early, broadly, and to quote her, language guides our reasoning. So cool. So when it comes to speaking about people and their identities specifically, how can we make sure we're being respectful and empathetic? Because though language can shape how we think, we can also shape language because it is a living, breathing thing. The words we use every day have a tremendous amount of power, whether we're describing other people or events or ideas or the things around us. Think about how early in the pandemic, the term social distancing was most common when describing staying 6 feet apart, where now we use the term physical distancing. That's about being more specific and accurate, because health officials were never saying, don't talk to anyone, they were saying, physically, please stay apart. When people are telling you to say something differently, it's not because they think they know better. They're just trying to help make your words more accurate and meaningful. And for different communities, being specific and accurate is about respect that is owed to them. Using words that are historically loaded with violence, injustice, and persecution is not just a faux pas. it often feels like an act of violence in and of itself. As someone who has received their fair share of racial and homophobic slurs, I can tell you it cuts deep and it makes people feel disrespected and often unsafe. Okay, so I want to reiterate that a key part of using your privilege is about listening to specific communities and learning from that knowledge. Adjusting the words you use is probably one of the most common ways to do this. If you need a refresher on how to use your privilege and what privilege is, go check out my last episode. Hang on, one thing first. In this video, I will not tell you what not to say. You will not face legal consequences for saying whatever horrible thing you can think up. Well, unless it's hate speech or defamation, which hopefully is not your intention. You are free to say whatever you want, but that also means others are free to criticize you and think differently of you for what you say. Freedom of expression does not mean freedom from consequences or judgment. Like, you can call me whatever slur you want as long as it's not hate speech, but I don't have to like it or be okay with it, and neither does anyone else. Now, much smarter people than me have developed frameworks to help you on the ever-changing journey of respectful language. Because I'm not going to pretend that learning every single nuance about every single community is easy. It's definitely not. So here are 4 key concepts based off the style guides for inclusive language developed by the DC Fiscal Policy Institute and the nonprofit organization Some of Us. First, we're going to talk about people first language, which is super simple. Everyone is a person, and therefore we need to keep that as the #1 priority when we're talking about a certain group or identity. For example, that's why we say people of color rather than the obviously offensive colored people. That phrase feels loaded with racism because it is. It has painful associations with the Jim Crow era, segregation, and disenfranchisement. All in all, personhood must come first. That's also why we say people with disabilities and people of low income, rather than swapping those words around. It's also about respecting self-identification. Basically, it's key to give all the opportunity to self-identify and respect that agency once they have. This gives people power over their own story and how they are described. Simple things like asking someone's pronouns or sexuality instead of assuming, and respecting their pronouns. Something to think about, these aren't their preferred pronouns, they're just their pronouns. Remember when we were talking about making language accurate and specific? It's a key example. There are also things that you might not know about people's personal feelings about certain words. Like, some LGBTQ+ people love the word queer and others really don't. Or like, sometimes you might not know how a person of color might identify themselves. You should seriously just ask, hey, do you identify yourself as a person of color? If they identify as Black or Indigenous, it's important for them to have that moment to tell you. It's why we have a whole new acronym, Black, Indigenous, People of Color, rather than just people of color. It allows us to be more specific and accurate. These next 2 concepts are similar, and they're all about respect, acceptance, and being clear on what you're saying or writing. Using proper nouns and an active voice will help make sure that you are keeping people at the forefront of your language. Proper nouns, so like saying Kelly rather than that girl, aka the distinct name of a person, place, or thing. Proper nouns help us speak more specifically on an event or interaction and help avoid stereotyping by being more precise. Then it's about using an active voice. Whether you're writing or speaking about a community, a person, an organization, or a group of people, using an active voice helps point to who or what is doing the action. This helps us put our biases in check and help communicate more clearly and directly. For example, this is about racism in Stars Hollow versus racial inequality divides the community of Stars Hollow. The first example is vague and doesn't point to what is actually happening to the community. And in the second example, it's clear the blame is to be placed on racial inequality. This is indeed a Gilmore Girls reference, but to be clear, there is no racial division in Stars Hollow because there are like 3 people of color who say words in the entire 7 seasons of the show. No one is perfect. We are all on our own journeys. We have to help each other learn about these things. So, Google a word or ask a friend or tell your mom she shouldn't say that thing anymore. Please just move through the world knowing that words can hurt in ways that you may not understand, and that not using a word or respecting someone's pronouns is way easier and kinder than hurting the people around you. Also, correcting a word choice is a great opportunity to call someone into a conversation. If you want to learn more about that, go check out my video on how to have tough conversations. Tell me about a time someone corrected you and you learned from it in the comments below, or tell me what you think a future episode should be. This is Personal Politics, where I get up close and personal with ideas that spark change. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date, and I'll see you next time.
So she does such a great job summarizing this 4 points from the Progressive Style Guide from the sum of us. And with that, I'm going to end this sharing and say I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday, and I hope you're having a wonderful week.